Jim Reyer, received your CDs and was very happy to hear from you and did listen to them completely. You're a very long-winded guy, Chuck. It took me about 4 hours, I suppose, to listen to them. But I did want to listen to them, and I did want to hear what you had to say. I know things are pretty bad out in Pasadena in that way, and I say it this way. I don't know exactly what's going on. I do hear from people, but what bothers me the most, and I tell you this, I do pray for Mr. DeKoch and the leadership every day, and I do think we ought to do that, and so that we don't get into attitudes that go against government, and that's certainly something we all need to take a long look at. But it does bother me when I hear, and I do hear from people who have been forced out of the church and who have, against their own will, in a way, been forced to change from Saturday to Sunday. You know, when you start messing with the widows and the fatherless and the elderly, the Scriptures are very plain on what God says about doing those kind of things. And it just seems like I have told a person, and I have said this on occasions, I have said, look, I said, we may have done things wrong. I'm not here to tell people that I didn't do things wrong. Obviously, everyone has done something wrong, and probably some of the things we did need to repent of. But what bothers me the most, I said, is maybe there were people put out of the church under our, if you want to put it this way, regime. But I haven't put out as many people and forced as many people to do. I've never made people do things against their will. I've never done that. And I can't understand how anyone can be forced to do something when the Scriptures are very plain that you don't go against someone's conscience. Even Paul was very careful dealing with people's conscience. So I have a hard time sometimes trying to figure out, exactly what God is going to do. I do know certain things. I know Scriptures, and you do too, where it says in the Old Testament, it definitely says when people do not obey God, and God Himself puts them out of the church when they refuse to keep the functions that God has set down. Also, if you offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it's better than a millstone hung about your neck and you were drowned in the midst of the sea. God also in Galatians pronounced through Paul a double curse on those who would go against the gospel. And obviously there are many Scriptures, as you and I know, that literally scare me when I'm dealing with God's people. I've told people many times, these are not my people. These are God's sheep, and they belong to Jesus Christ. And when you know that Christ has worked in their lives, and these people, they want to love Jesus, and they want to do the things they do, that's one thing. But the other thing is, to turn people away from God is unbelievable to me. I've heard from others, and I don't know how true this is, maybe you've heard it, I don't know, but I've heard that even some of the ones who were the most influential in changing the doctrine don't even attend. I don't know how true that is, but I don't hear. I've talked to many. I said, where do some of these people attend? And I'll mention them by name. I'm not going to mention the names on here. And they'll say, well, one of them, he attends with his wife to another church. I can't understand that. If you change the doctrine and you're so high on it and you're so quote unquote, wrapped up in it, and you really done a job here of changing things, and you really feel they're good, man, you think those people would be speaking every week at the headquarters church, and they'd be speaking in the church, they would be attending it, and they would be the top leaders in it, and they would be doing most of the teaching so that everybody could basically hear it right out of their mouth. But they don't do it that way, if at least what I hear, if what I hear is true. Well, anyhow, I don't have an axe to grind, Chuck, and I want you to know that. I am concerned, though, about a lot of God's people, and I do hear from people all over the United States. They have called me, and even some people from Canada have not called me, but they wanted to contact me. But I just feel that we're under a government that we better, adhere to, and better use a lot of wisdom. I don't say they sit in Moses' seat. I don't think that scripture applies. But they do sit in Mr. Armstrong's seat. And I do believe that they were ordained so. And then I'll let God be the judge. Jesus Christ is the head of his church. And we should know that by now. And I don't know why God allowed it, but I do know from talking to different ones and seeing United, as you said, who is not united. I don't see people who have left and gone to other groups and just keep splintering off. That's no different than the Protestant Reformation. This is the mother church. So what they're doing is protesting in their own way. I do not know what God will allow as far as our future is concerned. But I will say it this way. I don't believe in my mind that anyone can destroy God's church. Christ said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. He's also stated, things that, over the past, I think in the time of Esther, and I'll use that as an example, that the whole Jewish race was trying to be destroyed from the face of the earth. And God, in his own way, had set aside Esther long before that happened. And, of course, if you read the story, you can know that Mordecai was completely exonerated, and the one who wanted to do him in was put to death. And in the time of Daniel. And also, it'll happen time and time again. I don't think what we're experiencing today really is any different than what people experienced in all of the church eras, starting with the first one where Paul said even all of Asia departed from Paul. So I don't think it's ever been any time in the history of the church it's ever been God's, I guess you might say, his idea or whatever, his program to keep everyone in. I am amazed when I was in Pasadena in the 86s, I already knew after Mr. Armstrong died and got out there in the fall that this church was beset by many, many serious problems. And I did know that a lot of these high-ranking ministers who are no longer with the church were no better than anyone else, and I just know that. Some of them were very fine people. I respect them. But I'm talking overall that there was a tremendous many problems within the church, and I don't have to get into the nitty-gritty. I think God will judge that in his time. But I'm very happy that I'm up here. I don't know what the future forebodes or what we're going to see. I have no idea. I can't tell you. I only know that I'm up here with some people who I feel are fundamentally solid. They want to obey God. They don't want to go anywhere else. They was called into this church. They were called by God through Christ, as you know, and by the laying on of hands was placed into God's church. That should be taken very seriously. And I take it very seriously, and I told people even no matter what they do about my ministry, they can't take the Spirit of God out of me. When I had the laying on of hands and the Spirit of God came into me and placed within me the ability to do the job that I'm doing, I don't take that lightly. The ability that I have, I feel strongly comes from the power of God. And the protection we're going to have in the future comes from and through the power of God. There is no doubt in my mind that Jesus Christ is in charge of his church. I think that's always been true. I don't believe that Mr. Armstrong saw it any other way. And he knew that. And I've read much of his writings and gone over many of the things we've written in the past, things he said, conference notes, correspondence courses, everything I can think of, Mystery of the Ages and all. Went through everything that I can see that we've ever written. And I would say this, too. I recommend that many people out there do that. What I am concerned about is that we're going to lose out. And many people are going to lose out if they don't keep themselves abreast of what we've taught. Those things that were written long ago are just as solid today as they always have been, and they should be retained. And in some cases, maybe updated, but I think, retained. What I've seen up here, and I tell you that, is the people up here know doctrine. They're not trying to just obey by going to the Sabbath and going to the holy days in some foreign area or something where you don't hear anything. What I've done on many occasions and told people, listen, you got all the tapes of Mr. Armstrong, you've got the correspondence courses, you've got all the literature. Go off somewhere if you have to with a group or whatever you want to do. And here you can listen to the apostle every day of the feast. And I haven't found it doing that we've lost anything up here. I don't see that I've lost anything. Many times I spend the Sabbath with my wife right here in the home studying. Maybe a few people come over and we study and we keep our mind upon what we've always been taught. You know, we can let those things slip. That's the only thing I've seen about people that I talk to is they've ceased studying. And I mean, sure, they study the Bible. Sure, they go to the services out there. I'm not against that if that's what they want to do. But if that's all you're getting, and that's all the people are getting, I'm afraid they may starve to death. Because that's not true up here. I'm amazed at some of the tapes we have. You've sent me many of them. I listen to them very regularly. I also study our literature very plainly. I've gone over everything basically that comes off the internet. You can get about anything. And I have studied it, and I have been amazed at the things either that we didn't understand or in some ways we let slip. I can't tell you what I knew back 25, 30 years ago, but I can tell you this, it's more pronounced in me now than it was then. So I am concerned that people just want to go to church, quote, unquote, and then they go somewhere afterwards on the Sabbath. But I don't do that, and I tell the people up here, if we're going to grow in grace and in knowledge, then we had better make our fellowship first and foremost with Jesus Christ and God the Father. That is in 1 John 1, and it says that our fellowship is with God in Christ. And I could see that a lot of people had never really done that at the feast. Mainly people go to the feast to fellowship with each other. But in Zechariah 7, I don't have my Bible, I'm just talking off the top of my head. Christ said, in all those years that you fasted, in all of those days that you kept my day, did you really do them unto me? Did you really? Or did you do them unto yourself? And that's what I saw, that many of us, it just became a social club where people just love to be around each other. They love to talk. We love to have the fellowship with each other. But I have learned a long time ago that if I want to be in God's kingdom and I want to be a part of what God is doing in the first resurrection, then I'm going to be about God's business. And I knew that from years past, that a river can rise no higher than its source. Deuteronomy 17 says when a man sits on his throne and he's given a kingship, it says he needs to study the Bible every day of his life. I was told that, and I have found that that is a very good uplifting way to start a day. If you don't study in the morning, it's certainly a good way to study and study before you go to bed. But praying and fasting, meditating and study of God's Word and our literature that I have found, it keeps me on track. If I were just to study the Bible by myself and not with the literature, it would not be long and I wouldn't be any different than United or Global or anyone else. But I have learned to stick with the trunk of the tree, stay with that, I know, and obey God the best way God has allowed me. You know, we live in a day and age, and I tell people this, if you lived 100 years ago, I could not have traveled from where I live into Billings to a church service because it's 20 miles or 30 miles. I said, we live in a day when we have everything given to us. We can fly to a feast site. We can drive to a feast site. And we can go anywhere on the face of the earth. We can listen to anything over the radio. We can watch anything on TV. I said, we have literature. I can listen to the apostle who has been dead now for how long? From 1996. What about, let's see, that would be 14, 17, almost 18 years, coming into 18 years. And I listen to him on a regular basis. And you know something? A lot of the things he said we didn't get, I didn't get. So I know that we have all of the literature. We have the same proclivities of being able to study as we had when he was alive. And we have the literature. So I don't see any loss, except I do feel bad that we can't help people, which I think God will make possible in his own way when he sees. And certainly, I don't know, between you and me, I can't, some of the things that take place, I just don't know if I could be a part of in this service. And I've prayed that way to God. And what I've said is, I just can't do these things. I'm not rebellious. I don't hate these men. I pray for them. I have nothing against them personally. But I just cannot do what they're doing. In no way. And I can't teach it. And I'm very plain about it. But I said, I don't know what to do. I just ask God to bless what we do and keep us in a way that we can be protected and blessed. And I think God has done that. So I just say this. I'm not here to, obviously give any sermon as to what you men ought to do. I'm not in Pasadena. I said I'm glad I'm not there. I don't know what I would do if I was out there, and I don't judge anybody that's out there. But I do feel that maybe sometimes, as I was saying before, that we need to take a long look at what we're truly doing ourselves, preparing our minds and our hearts for the kingdom of God. And I remember Mr. Armstrong saying one time that a person should know the Bible inside and out because he's going to be judging from it. I have felt a long time, between you and me, that I feel we are the Aaronic priesthood in a spiritual sense. We're certainly the teachers. I don't see how any other era could teach the way we can teach with the literature that we have. I don't think anyone's been in the type of surroundings that the Philadelphia era has been in, where we've got television. We can see things around the world. Mr. Armstrong, on the high days, spoke all around the world. That is unbelievable to me. And even when Elvis Presley did his special from Hawaii, it was heard in every nation in the world. And seen, I guess it was not only heard, it was seen over on TV on every aspect of this globe. No other era could ever say that. The other thing that I would say, too, is that we have the printing press, and we have put out more literature than anyone else. We have the ability now through the computer to move information so fast. So I can't see that we're anyone but the teachers of the world tomorrow. I just can feel that very deeply. I think Mr. Armstrong taught that. I believe he did. And I know he said that on many occasions, that he felt we would be teachers, and that one of the 4 mandates, the 3 mandates that he gave was come out of this world, simplify your life, and learn to be a teacher. And, of course, Mr. DeKoch added the next one, to be a family, which I think truly is true, to learn how to be God's family and the kingdom of God and work together and be one in mind and spirit and heart. But I would love to come out there sometime. I've thought about it, but I can't, and I don't think at this time it would be wise. I'd love to see all of you. I'd love to see every one of you. And I think, too, that it's sometimes in my job, it gets lonely. Because when I say lonely, I'll say it this way. I have no one to really talk to from a spiritual point of view that I used to. I could call Pasadena, and when I had a problem or something came up, then I needed, someone to come fly out from Pasadena or clarify a doctrine or help me with something. I now can only go to those things that I know that I have written down at conferences. Go back through the literature, and I'll find things that I know are true. And I have been able to go back and make judgments on basically things that have already been decided on. And God just does it that way. So it helps me in that way, which I never could do before, was to see how we made judgments and decisions on things. Therefore, I have to make those. And I make them on a small level. And I am sure that God has guided my mind to see that these things that were written down and have already been decided will probably be something that all of us need to learn in the future. I can see what could possibly take place at the place of safety when we will maybe get our final training, as Mr. Waterhouse used to teach us, that we very likely will be in one place. Hopefully. I don't know if that's 100% true, but with the modern things that we have today, it certainly can be understood that it could take place. But when we're together and we do all that, I'm pretty sure God will guide our minds, and it'll be our final training and bring us together as one, because Mr. Armstrong says very emphatically in the Mystery of the Ages, I don't know what page, is it 258 or 158? You can look it up yourself. He said without a doubt that he finished the work, and he also said that this is the last generation that will be on the face of the earth. I totally believe that. I believe that we are now looking at those prophecies that we gave back in the 50s and 60s, and you ought to go back and study them. They are more accurate now than they were at that time. And they're like they're alive. And that we somehow just had a time of, I'll put it this way, going into hibernation. We used to say that about prophecy. Did you know that? When Ernest Martin was a teacher in Pasadena and I was studying under him, he said, do you know, he said that all prophecy goes into hibernation. It just seems to go in, and then you just wait on it, and pretty soon, boom, it explodes, and it's on the world scene, and here it is, and it moves along at a tremendous pace. So I can see that a lot of these things that were taught maybe back then, was maybe with the literature, it was for us today. Maybe it wasn't for those people. It's more for us today, and people are not even heeding them or reading them or understanding them. And yet the Scriptures are very plain in Luke 21, verse 36, that we are to watch and pray always, that we could be accounted worthy to escape all of these things, you see. And I'm pretty sure that we are the Philadelphia era. I feel that way about those who have remained true. I'm not saying that all of us are, and I'm not saying everyone that left is Laodicean. But I can see that there is a tremendous, how would you put it, a group of people who still are holding on very fast to truth. And that, by the way, that's all over the United States. I hear from people, they're just little groups here and there, and they're staying true, waiting on God, praying. A lot of them are widows. A lot of them are older people, some who've been around for many, many years. I don't solicit any people to call me because I don't feel I have the money or the... I ought to say this, I don't think God has called me to do that. He may in the future call someone. I always have told Dr. Hay, and I've told him this, that you're the evangelist. God has placed within you the ability to be an evangelist. I'm a pastor, and I was given the responsibility of 3 churches, and I don't see that I have the authority or the spiritual ability through God to go above my office and think that I'm an apostle or an evangelist. As you know, many of these people do. I don't see how they can do what they do. You cannot take an office to yourself. Romans, 5:10, or I think it is in there where it talks about that. It says, no man takes this office to himself. It's either 5:10 or 10:5. But anyhow, we cannot take an office to ourselves. And I don't do that. I try to help people when they call me. But I'm very explicit on what I say. I say, look, I'm a pastor. God has put me in a certain position. We have to be patient. We just wait on God, trust that He's going to bring it together, and not wax cold, as it says, because iniquity shall abound, the many of love. And that's agape love. That's the love of God that's in us through the laying on of hands. Waxes cold. We've got to keep the Spirit of God in us strong by prayer and fasting. And I try to do that. And I don't feel like I've waxed any weaker than any time on the face of the earth that I've been on. In fact, if anything, I feel stronger today than I did 15, 20 years ago. But I've had to stay everlastingly at it. It isn't easy. It is a battle, as Paul said. But we just need to fight a good fight. And as you know, you were in sports. And I did get a big kick out of you in the football games, and I understand that. And you know what it is. It says, I remember one time they were interviewing somebody. I have it on paper anyhow. They said, what is the definition of a champion? And he was a boxer. He said, a champion gets up off the floor when there ain't no way to get up off the floor, he said. And I thought about those kind of men, and I guess I've always had a respect for strong men. I don't know why. I'm bound through the years. I don't think money has always been something I have craved, or I don't know if prestige. I don't know what it is. But one thing I admired men. Like I used to just study guys like Custer and Patton and Winston Churchill's life, and MacArthur's, as you know, and then other people who've been strong, and I always admired strength in men. And now here I am having to be strong for a lot of people, and like you do with your family, and don't think it doesn't matter to them. But they don't want to see Daddy whimpering or their husband whimpering. They want to see a strong man that can stand the test of time. And I feel like that's exactly what God's called us to do. And I feel like that's what's required of me. And I have a lot of people up here who look to me. And I think the hardest thing in my mind, or the most serious mistake I could ever make in my mind, or something I could never live with, would be to let these people down in any way. And I think about that. And I think about how, when I read stories about the Second World War, or the Band of Brothers, I don't know if you saw those DVDs, but if you ever get a chance to see the Band of Brothers, which I think Spielberg did, I'm not sure who did that, but I had a chance to see them when I was up to New England. Nigel and Kelly got them and showed them to Sandra and I, and I'll tell you, I was so impressed by these people, and their slogan was, "We stand alone together." I thought, what a tremendous slogan to keep. We stand alone together. And that's how I feel about you and me, Chuck, and I feel that about a lot of the men that I respect, that are holding fast to God's way. But I don't try to cause any trouble. I don't feel that's God's way. I'm not a meddler in their lives. If they want to teach what they teach, who am I to, in any way, I'm not, God didn't call me, at least I don't feel He has, in any way told me that my responsibility is go correct to Mr. DeKoch. That's not my agenda. It's not something that I feel He wants me to do. But He has called me, in my mind, to stand fast in the way that He has called me, and in the responsibility that He has given to me by the laying on of hands. And that I will do. And that I do. I don't expect them to do what I'm doing, but then I don't want them to expect me to do what they're doing. I don't know if you're familiar. You were probably with is it Chris Carter that played for the Minneapolis. I read the football team, Vikings, and they were quoting him as he was, helping Moss, which I don't respect too much about Moss, but I did Chris Carter, and this is what he said, and I will say it to you. He said, I had a lot of problems over the past. In other words, I think it was into drugs and alcohol pretty heavy. And, of course, he straightened himself out and, quote, unquote, became a Christian. So I'm not his judge in any way. And he says that, and good enough for me. But what I'm saying is, this is what he said. I had to set a high standard for myself. He said, so I told Randy Moss, and I tell others that, look, I don't expect you to live up to my standards. I've set these standards high for myself. But I'm not coming down to yours either. And you're going to have to set your own standards. And I'll be the best example I can. I'll help you whenever I can. But as for the standards that I set, I will not, in other words, compromise one bit. I'm just going to use my own paraphrasing. But I'm not coming down to yours, and I don't expect anyone to come up to mine. And that's between them and themselves. In other words, that's their own business. I like that. And that's how I feel about things. I'm not coming down to anyone else's standards, but I don't expect everyone to come up to mine either. That's up between them and God. But I've set high standards in my mind of what God is requiring of me. And I'm a husband of a very fine woman who, by the way, says hello. And I love her deeply. I wouldn't hurt her for nothing. I've seen one of my daughters die, and it hurt me deeply. It's like it would you. I know how much you love your daughter. But I have known that they looked at me. I had to remain strong, which I did through God, through Christ. And these people here who look to me, I try to set a standard that they can respect. I tell them all the time, Chuck, that you have to love your enemies, but you don't have to respect your enemies. So I don't want your love. I didn't say it quite that way, but I said, I'd rather have your respect than your love, because I know you have to respect. If I get your respect, you have to love your enemies even. So I said, I'm not working on that one. I'm working on your respect. And that's the way I look at things, and that's the way I look at you. You know, I think of a man that travels in the way you do and keeps himself loyal to God. And I'm sure you do, and I hope you do. I can't say anything but respect, that I have deep respect for you, and all those around you. That I hope they're doing the same thing. But I wouldn't go out there and cause trouble. I'm not causing trouble. I want to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. I want to see God's church turned around. I don't want to see anyone go to the lake of fire. I don't like to see people ruined and their families ruined. I don't take any delight in the death of Mr. Tkach. He was one of my closer friends. I deeply loved Mr. Tkach. I've known him. I knew them since 1959. I met him up in Chicago. Always treated me fair. I never had anything but good relationship with the Tkach family over the years. And I'm sorrowed that he died. I'm sorrowed about the things that took place. I'm not going to get into them. But I don't believe anybody ought to in any way disrespect his office, as I don't Mr. Tkach's, his son. I hold an office high. When I was in the military, this is what they said to me when the officer was, this was during the Korean War, and he was out of the Second World War, so you can imagine what kind of man he was. He said, look at me. You're not going to like me at all. In fact, you may hate me. But when you salute me, you're saluting my uniform in this country. And when you salute the flag, you're saluting the country. You're not going to like me. And, of course, I'll put it this way. We called him Little Napoleon. And he was not the easiest guy to get along with. But I learned in a hurry that you respect the office that the person holds. And I did when I saluted him. Anything, and that's true, that we should be understanding that the office that they hold is very high. And I look at it that way. I don't know if I could attend out there. I tell you that. I can't. I'm not like Dr. Hay in that way. I don't know. I just can't do it. I'm too cut and dried. It's either black or white with me. It's not gray. And I can't do those things. And I've asked God, out of His great mercy, not to put me in a situation that I would have to, in any way, hurt anybody or do something that would be degrading to my office or in any way disrespect theirs. And God has honored that. When someone was here and they wanted me to give a testimony and started changing the services around, I looked the man right in the eye and said, I will not give any testimonies, and I will not sing those songs. And he didn't know what to say. It's right in front of a bunch of people. He just looked at me. And he wanted to go out and eat with me, and then I did. And the man confessed to me that he didn't agree with any of it. I couldn't believe it. And I said, well, how can you do that? Now, he didn't know. He went back and resigned. So we never had a minister since. And I don't know how to handle anyone else. I don't tell anybody to do what I did. I'm not here to say that I don't know what I'd do if I was in Pasadena. I've thought that out many a time. I just have asked God not to put me under that circumstance. And I just haven't been under it. And I can see what you were saying, how God has blessed your mind and given you the ability to handle things when they've come up. You've kept your cool. And it sounds like God has honored what you've done. I admired that and hoped I could do that. I'm not sure that under the circumstances, every time I've done that, I've handled it as well. And I hope I'll learn how to handle things better and be more respectful of people and their offices and so on. I always want to do that because I feel it is an attribute of God, and it is something that we have to realize that authority, those offices, are put in by God. Well, anyhow, I don't know how much more that I want to carry on this conversation. We're coming to the end of one side of the tape. I will say this, that I'm glad to hear from you. I would like an update. I do appreciate when people update me as to what is really going on. I do keep pretty much in tune. I won't go into any names. I do know what goes on. I have that ability because of good friends. But it's always nice to hear and to know that people are standing fast in the truth of the living God and the church of the living God, which I truly feel we're in. So I will probably end the conversation here, and I do look forward to sometime, Chuck, meeting you and seeing you and being a part of you again in your life. And I'm sure the way God's going to carry things out, if I read the Scriptures properly, that may happen sooner than we think. God moves fast when He has to move. With that then, Chuck, I'll say goodbye and love you and tell everybody hello, and I hope this helps. I don't know exactly what to say, but I hope this helps you in some way. If not, just throw it in the trash can. But anyhow, love you and respect you and say hello to your family and all of those around. And I just thank you very much for writing me and keeping me attuned and all the things that you do. And take care of yourself. Stay close to God. We need you. Bye.